start.
Good morning. My name is Megan O'Malley, and this is Sarah Carrat. We're here representing Cedar Consulting. Our company focuses our consulting on the ethical dimensions of business problems and solutions. We are here today because you, the Executive Board of Colgate-Palmolive, have become concerned about the use of the chemical triclosan in your toothpaste Colgate Total. You came to us a few months ago with these concerns. You were originally concerned because both the FDA and the EPA are re-reviewing the safety of the chemical triclosan. You asked for our professional and independent assessment on the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of this problem, and today we'll provide a summary of our findings. Sarah will begin by outlining the basic qualities of triclosan. She will discuss how triclosan is used in your product, the benefits of including it in your product, as well as the multiple risks of harm. I will then talk to you about the international trends that we have noticed regarding the restrictions on the use of triclosan. I will tell you about a pending court case involving the legality of triclosan in the United States. I will then pose financial considerations that will ultimately lead to our final recommendation. Sarah will present our final recommendation, which is to remove triclosan from your Colgate toothpaste and to replace it with an equally effective alternative chemical. I'll begin with the reason why you were concerned in the first place. The EPA and the FDA are the two American agencies that regulate the use of triclosan. The FDA has chosen to re-review the safety of triclosan, and their website cites several scientific studies as the reason for their re-review of the chemical. These studies are concerning to the FDA because they suggest a harm to animals. The re-review and potential regulation of triclosan has obvious implications for your company, but these implications are not the focus of our presentation. Our focus is on the potential risk of harm to your customers, regardless of the legality of the chemical. Taking your concerns into consideration, we started somewhere simple, with the core values of Colgate-Palmolive. Your core values read, our three fundamental values, caring, global teamwork, and continuous improvement, are a part of everything we do. We will use these values in our assessment of the use of the chemical triclosan. Sarah will now tell you more about triclosan and the risks that it poses to your consumers.
As Megan had said, we are here at your request to reevaluate the use of triclosan in your product, especially in terms of the ethical implications. Colgate Total uses the chemical triclosan, and we believe that this causes your customers a significant risk of harm. Ultimately, this risk of harm can cause your company harm too. Let us begin why you included triclosan in your toothpaste to begin with. Triclosan is a very powerful antibacterial. It helps fight gingivitis, which is the inflammation of the gums caused by bacteria around the base of your teeth. Now, these bacteria can be broken down by triclosan and eventually stop from reproducing. In this way, triclosan fights gingivitis in the mouth, and it's a really unique property that is unique to this chemical, and only a very few select other chemicals. The problem is that this chemical, in addition to being effective, may also be dangerous. Triclosan causes your company an unnecessary risk of harm when it threatens the environment and the customers that use the toothpaste directly. But let's start closest to home, with the customers who are directly at risk of harm from using your toothpaste, and then we can move on to other life forms and the environment. In humans, triclosan is absorbed through the mouth and the intestines. It's been shown that continuous normal use of triclosan over 12 weeks can lead to chronic circulation of triclosan in the system. This means that brushing your teeth twice a day for 12 weeks will cause your body to accumulate more triclosan than it can get rid of on its own. Other studies confirm these findings by showing that triclosan is present in both the breast milk and the blood of pregnant mothers. Studies have found that people who use triclosan-containing products are more likely to have high concentrations of triclosan in their blood than those who don't use it. In other words, it is not just something they're getting naturally from their environment, but directly from the products that they use. So what does this mean? What are the harmful effects of triclosan when it is in human bodies? Well, for children, this means that they're more frequently diagnosed with allergies. This is especially concerning because your product, Colgate Total, it even says on the label that it is not intended for use of children, but yet children use Colgate Total. Triclosan is not proved to be effective in either its anti-gingivitis or anti-plaque capacities in children. No studies show that it benefits them in any way, and yet they're at risk of harm. In animals, there's a multitude of evidence pointing to the fact that triclosan will disrupt the thyroid hormones. While this effect is suspected to be carried over into humans as well, the studies are right now limited to bullfrogs, rats, and dolphins. The hypothesis is that triclosan blocks the metabolism of the thyroid hormone because it chemically mimics the thyroid hormone as it binds to the receptors. This means that while the receptors might think that there is more of the thyroid hormone present in your blood, they're not actually registering the proper amounts of hormones in your system. The concentrations of triclosan that have been found in the animals have been linked to growth and development issues throughout dolphins, bullfrogs, and rats. So one of the main problems and really concerning things about the triclosan in the environment is that it does not break down easily. In fact, it's a significantly increased risk because it's very hard to remove even after being processed through wastewater systems. Triclosan is highly stable, and even after several degradation steps in the water, it remains in the system. This explains how life forms, such as dolphins that do not directly use products containing triclosan, have such high concentrations in their system. Triclosan has even been found in the bile of fish that have simply been exposed to civil wastewater. Ultimately, triclosan impacts even the most basic of life forms, such as plants and algae, by impairing photosynthesis and ultimately killing the organism. In a review of health risks, triclosan is believed to be toxic in long-term low-dose exposures. Again, this means that using triclosan-containing products twice a day for 2 weeks at a normal dose is considered to be toxic, especially to lower vertebrates. And I'm not the only one who's observed these risks of harm. As Megan will now talk to you about, the international legal trends are also reflecting that these issues of harm are worldwide.
Sarah just told you about the multiple risks of harm of low-dose, long-term exposure to triclosan. There is also an international movement to restrict the use of triclosan, and I will give you the bullet points of those restrictions right now. In the European Union, triclosan is not permitted to come into contact with food. This meant the removal of triclosan from cutlery, Tupperware, and anything else used in the preparation and distribution of food. In Canada, triclosan is not to be used by children under the age of 12 at all. In Norway, Norway will not import or export products that contain more than a 0.3% concentration of triclosan. In Germany, triclosan is only to be used in the most critically necessary environments, such as hospitals. In the United States, however, there are no restrictions on the use of triclosan. But this may be quickly changing due to the increased pressure on the FDA to finally restrict the use of triclosan. A prime example of this pressure is that in 2010, the NRDC sued the FDA to finally restrict the use of triclosan. The NRDC wants the FDA to finalize a document that they originally drafted in 1974 that would remove triclosan from any personal health products. So the FDA has been sitting on this for a very long time, and the NRDC filed a very lengthy and thorough lawsuit demanding that they restrict the product, which was one of the big reasons why the FDA decided to re-review it in the first place. The NRDC posed them with all sorts of concerning studies that show potential risks of harm by triclosan. So we want you not to be only concerned about the legality of triclosan, but also the impression that people get when they go to search for triclosan. If you go home today and Google search for Colgate triclosan, you will find the first results classify it as a safety concern, a pesticide, a carcinogen, as well as other websites that petition to remove triclosan from every product everywhere. This is troubling because when Sarah called the Colgate-Palmolive customer helpline, she was told, triclosan has not been found to be harmful to the human endocrine system. She was given no further information. That is a quote that's directly from your website. So this lack of information that you give to your customers about triclosan may lead them to places like Google, and this is what they'll see. Just so you know, triclosan is not a carcinogen, but I only know that because Sarah told me. The average customer won't know. We're concerned that this image of triclosan may affect your customers' faith in your company and your dedication to caring. This, in turn, may affect your profits. Oh, shoot. Okay. There's a graph. Colgate-Palmolive holds 44% of the world toothpaste market. That means that they have $5.3 billion coming in every year. 36% of this, that lightest blue little wedge, that's all from Colgate Total, which makes Colgate Total the single best-selling toothpaste in the world. What we are concerned about is that these profits may be at risk because of the image that triclosan gives and that your customers may lose faith in your company. As well, if the FDA does restrict the use of triclosan, these will be at risk also. So what we want is that you should take action now. We want you to be ahead of the FDA, and we want you to see the concerns of your consumers and the concerns of the scientific world. We're afraid that if you choose not to act right now, then these profits will be at risk unnecessarily. And these are profits that protect your shareholders, and they also protect your many employees. So Sarah will now tell you about our final recommendations, and she will start with a case study about two companies, one of which we want you to emulate and the other one which we don't want you to be. These are two companies that have faced similar problems to yours. Sarah?
As Megan said, we believe that there are two companies that have faced similar problems to yours, and they're prime examples of what you should and should not do. We believe that Nalgene, an example of proactivity, and Zicam, an example of someone, well, we frankly just don't want you to emulate, are perfect examples for this case. So Zicam began receiving customer complaints about loss of smell. Zicam, for those of you who don't know, is a nasal spray, very popular for allergy relief, congestion, things like that. When customers began reporting loss of smell, they ignored customer complaints, and they stifled lawsuits by saying that our product is not directly linked in any scientific study to the harm that you're experiencing. Sounds a little familiar. Well, today they've already settled $15 million in lawsuits. Proportional to the toothpaste industry, this could mean the billions of dollars for you. Nalgene, on the other hand, is a prime example of a company that was very proactive. When they heard that BPA, a chemical that was contained in their water bottles, would potentially be an endocrine disruptor and harmful to their customers, they pulled all of their bottles off the shelf and they took BPA out of their products. Well, triclosan is an endocrine disruptor. And what we're asking today is not that different than what Nalgene did. And today, the U.S. has still not banned BPA, but Nalgene is not producing bottles with BPA. They have a Go Green name, and they're well sought by customers who trust their company. Our recommendation is that you really remember your core values. Remember that you're supposed to care for your customers. Global teamwork. We want you to strive for continuous improvement, your third core value. We think that it's very important to really examine the chemicals that you're using and what your customers have to say about them. Chemicals that your competitors use, such as sodium fluoride, stannous fluoride, and sodium bicarbonate, are all very effective against plaque. Stannous fluoride, the middle chemical, is also very effective against gingivitis, with none of the known side effects that triclosan has. There's different prices for each, but stannous fluoride is very comparable to the price of triclosan. In fact, it's cheaper. You have a team of scientific researchers at your disposal. You use them to decide why triclosan should be allowed to be kept in your toothpaste. We suggest that you now divert your research and to try looking more into alternative chemicals that are not known to be harmful. We believe that'll help both your company and your customers. Ultimately, we think that you should replace triclosan and continue to advertise your dedication to your core values. We think that your company has a very strong set of core values. And in the end, we think that if you take this opportunity to go green and market these core values, that you'll be better off than you ever were before. Thank you for inviting us here today, and we hope that we've helped you understand the risks of harm that are associated with triclosan. And now we'd like to open it up to any questions that you might have concerning our presentation.
Thank you very much, Megan and Sarah. Let's reset our mailbox. Ready?
I'm ready.
Go. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can you elaborate on what you feel the greatest ethical issue is facing us if indeed we don't replace triclosan?
Should we go with this?
Yeah, I think the greatest ethical issue is that now, since we've given our presentation, you see the risks of harm to your customers, and if you don't remove triclosan just because it's not legal, then you are seeking just to keep profits and you're not actually sticking to your core values, which are all over your website, and they are things that you advertise. You advertise a healthy mouth, healthy body, and these are things that you're essentially lying to your customers if you know there are problems with triclosan and you don't do anything about it.
Thanks very much.
So, do you think we did something unethical when we started to incorporate triclosan into Colgate Total? Or was it ethical to do it at that time, but now it's unethical to continue using it? Or?
I think that you're on the exact right track. I think that when you started, you had the customer's best interests in mind. You saw that there was a gap in the toothpaste market, that no other company was fighting gingivitis, this very serious disease of the mouth, and you sought for the continuous improvement values of your core values. You sought to protect your customers from that, to help them have a healthier mouth, healthy body, as Megan just mentioned, is one of your most impactful core values. However, now, as more studies are coming out evaluating the chemical triclosan, I think that it's time for a change. I think it's time to say, while our intent is still good and ethical, maybe this isn't the best way to execute our intent.
So would the ethical thing to do now, given the information that's available, would the ethical thing to do now would be to study replacing triclosan with another additive that could fight gingivitis? Or would the ethical thing to do now be to pull the product off the shelves entirely because of the risks that's been demonstrated so far?
I think that
I mean, are we harming people right now by
You could be.
marketing this product?
Yeah, so last year Colgate just launched a new marketing campaign, marketing for Colgate Total, which you sell all over the world. Personally, I saw it in India with triclosan in it. So, especially in places that don't have any type of water treatment plant, you're certainly harming the environment and you're potentially harming your customers. So yes, we would suggest that you stop selling Colgate Total now and you replace it with stannous fluoride. Replace triclosan with stannous fluoride. If you're not satisfied with stannous fluoride, then that's when your research comes into play. Stannous fluoride is okayed by the FDA to be used, but they okay chemicals that are already being used in products. So if there's something else that you think is better, then that would be independent research.
So could I There's one more. So as an alternative to simply pulling the product entirely off the market, and of course it'll take us a while to reproduce the product using something other than triclosan, what if we simply began to provide all the information that's available regarding risks to our customers with product inserts and information on the website, and let our customers decide whether they want to use it and take the risk given the benefit? Wouldn't it be just as ethical simply to let them make the choice, given full knowledge of the risks?
I think that in terms of ethics, we certainly would like more disclosure. We'd like you to be more open with your customers. There is a significantly increased risk to your financial obligations to your stockholders, your shareholders, should you present findings that cause people not to buy your toothpaste. So that's also an ethical concern we'd like you to keep in mind. We think that it is important for you to remove triclosan from your toothpaste. If the most effective way to do this and keep your company intact is to phase it out, gradually replacing it with a more effective chemical, or to just stop producing toothpaste that has triclosan, then that is something you should consider.
In the end, letting your customers choose does not let the environment choose if it wants triclosan or not. So you may remove the potential risk of harm to your customers who directly use it, but as you've seen, it is everywhere because it's in products like toothpaste.
Do you think there's a risk associated with marketing, the fact that we discontinue using a product that we had been using for a number of years that was found to be dangerous?
Yeah, there is a risk, and no matter what happens, your stock share will probably take a marginal hit, but in the end, it's the right thing to do, and we have seen companies bounce back from this. I think your consumers understand that in today's day and age, we could be taking in all sorts of chemicals that are harmful for us. But the companies that really take the hit are the ones who see those problems and they don't do anything about them.
Yeah, the challenge I have is that while I understand what you're saying and I appreciate the way in which you've presented the information, there really isn't definitive information out there, is there? That this product is going to do significant harm? Isn't it more that there's the threat of this product? And I guess given the financial implications to our company, in a perfect world, we'd like to remove anything that would harm anyone, but then as we all know, there wouldn't be any products available. So I guess from a realistic standpoint, how serious is this danger as you weigh it against the reality that we seem to constantly keep hearing information? Bacon caused cancer at one point, and then they quietly took that away. And then, there's all these scares and all these concerns. And while we certainly want to honor our values, we also don't want to be irresponsible in responding to any threat that is out there that isn't proven and substantiated as doing legitimate harm.
Certainly. Well, the research is leaning towards the more primitive life forms working its way up to the final stages with humans. And starting with the basic life forms, with the plants, with the aquatic life forms, fish, it's absolutely proven that the amount of triclosan that gets washed down the drains is seriously impacting the growth and development in fish, algae, plants, anything that comes in contact with the water system. Aquatic life is seriously impacted by the concentration of triclosan in your toothpaste, even at just 0.3%. As for larger life forms, vertebrates such as dolphins and humans, there are not as many studies, but the studies that do examine the amount of triclosan that gets into the systems, it's not just that you could be causing them harm, it's the alarming amount of triclosan that is retained within people and within other life forms. And should triclosan be directly linked to harmful effects later, it's accumulating even now in these life forms. And while the studies might not link it to harm very clearly, studies do link the presence of triclosan in every creature.
Yeah, The reason that we don't see any direct links of research that say there's definite harm to humans is that there just aren't any studies about low-dose, long-term exposure to humans. And those are the things that the EPA and the FDA and your company should be working on. So the EPA and the FDA should be publishing those within the next 2 years. And it's not just a minor risk of harm, it's a serious risk of harm to your customers. And if this is really harmful, it's incredibly harmful to them and to their thyroid, and could pose many problems in future, and also to development in children.
Shouldn't we wait until the FDA and the EPA has had a chance to further study the effects of triclosan, and at least the levels of triclosan that are in Colgate total, before we make a decision, and perhaps be prepared to act quickly based on their findings? I mean, isn't that the proper role of government in terms of regulating industry, and isn't the proper role of industry to let government and its regulatory agencies and its scientists take the lead in doing that, and to respond to that? And wouldn't that be a better course to take?
Well, if the FDA worked ideally, which is the agency that regulates your specific use of triclosan, then I would say yes. But if the FDA worked ideally, they would have published their ban on triclosan in 1974. So I think noticing this and noticing that the NRDC has acknowledged that the FDA has failed to act for 32 years, I think you should make the step on your own. And if you wait for the FDA, it's saying you are trying to squeeze out profits for as long as possible, even if that's not the case, and you really just want to see if it's safe or not, that's not what consumers are going to see.
In addition to that, I think it's important to recognize that you are not just a company that operates in the United States. Megan walked you through the international trends as far as legality of the chemical. And there are countries that won't let you sell your toothpaste as it is sold in the United States. I think this is very important to consider. You can't just look at the United States as a prime example because there are no regulations in the United States. We would like you to look at all the international trends and try and find a standard that is ethical globally.
So what you're recommending is, instead of following the legal rules in this sort of situation, we should follow ethical principles and consideration and not worry about the legal rules? Is that?
Well, I mean, if the legal rules were restricting your use of triclosan, then we wouldn't be here. So, yes, we would always advise you to follow legal rules, but in this case, ethical decisions should preempt legal decisions.
So, and what would we tell our customers if we did pull the product off the market? What would we tell them about what we've been doing up to this point in using triclosan, and what we've been saying about it on our website all these years? I mean, wouldn't we be admitting that we've been lying to our customers, and that we've been knowingly put them in harm's way? And I mean, should we just admit that to our customers as a further ethical thing to do, that we really weren't forthcoming on our website, given the scientific evidence, and we weren't necessarily considering their best interests and the possible risks of harm associated with the product? But now we are. We have been reformed by this decision. Is that the message we should give to our customers?
Well, we do think you're being very proactive as a board. You hired ethical consultants to look into this problem as soon as you were aware that there was a risk. We think that you did state very clearly on your website what you knew about the product, that there are no studies linking endocrine disruption in humans to your product or your chemical. However, we think that it's a little trickier to look at dolphins, rats, bullfrogs. They're not using toothpaste, but you need to look at the fact that the toothpaste is getting washed down the sink and into the wastewater system. Is it getting filtered out? Your dedication to your core values, your willingness to change, reflects such a deep compassion for your customers that I think it's okay to say, not only are we concerned about the health of our customers, but now we've realized that when you're in your own homes with our product, we want to take responsibility for that. We want to make sure that there's no branch of our company that's hurting the environment. And I think that if you were to disclose information that you know now about the chemical to your customers, that it would increase trust. that your customers have with your company.
Oh, that's from the last one. The bottom line is that you did not know that triclosan was harmful when you put it into your product. All you saw were the benefits, which Sarah clearly showed. It fights gingivitis, and I know many people who use Colgate Total just because of that. The fact now is that there are other chemicals that do the same thing, that don't pose this harm, and the harm is now evident, and it's only evident now. So those are actions that you need to take now, and you couldn't have seen this coming in the future, or in the past. So your customers should understand that if you see something that's potentially harmful to them, and it's not definitively harmful, if you only pull it once it's definitively harmful, they may lose some trust in you. But if you pull it at the first risk of harm to them and certain harm to the environment, I don't think you have to tell them that you were doing something wrong. You were working in their best interest, and you still are.
So what lessons should we take from this whole thing as a management team? So what should we learn from this in terms of how we do business in the future and how we deal with other issues like this? I mean, what's the ethical moral of this story?
I think that in order, your core values reflect caring, global teamwork, and continuous improvement. And again, we'd like you to look at those in the modeling prompts. You always have the continuous improvement. You introduced triclosan to fight gingivitis, now you're looking at the harmful effects of triclosan and what other chemicals you could use. Global teamwork. You're very well aware of your impact in other countries, and you've asked us to examine the ethical impacts worldwide. We think that looking at this factor of caring in the future, that if you continue to be on top of the research, that you use your resources well, that you shouldn't have ethical problems in the future. I think as long as you are proactive with dealing with problems, that's the most effective solution to take away from this.
Yeah, I think you should refocus your research not to bolster the good name of your products, but to challenge your products. And you should be at the front line of asking if our product is safe. And I think that is where you may have fallen short in the past, and that's something that you can clearly improve on.
I'm concerned about the financial considerations. I understand the ethical implications that you have shared with us. We are the dominant player in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it true that what you're suggesting could cost us untold dollars and impact our shareholders in a way that could be extremely negative? You're essentially, I guess, suggesting we pull a product off the shelf. There are implications for us in that. I understand the goodwill that you're suggesting we would create. I understand that you're making it a reputation issue. But can you talk a little bit more about what should compel us to put ourselves in a situation where shareholders and investors might raise real questions about proactivity at the expense of what they have rightly come to expect is
Yeah.
our ability to be dominant player.
Okay, so we do expect that your shares will take a marginal hit if you filter out Colgate Total with triclosan and you start replacing it with Colgate Total with stannous fluoride. The good thing is that you are replacing it with something that is equally as effective. The balance here, if you're truly only considering the financial aspects of this problem, is that you can take a marginal short-term hit and you can market Colgate Total with stannous fluoride, or you can take a permanent hit. So we believe that really building your good name is keeping your profits safe, because if your customers don't trust you, if you wait until the FDA says that it's harmful, or if you wait until these websites are just so terrible that everyone is afraid to use Colgate Total, or the NRDC just has a smear campaign about triclosan, those are permanent effects, and those are things that you'll see always. So if you pull it now and you replace it with something, you can tell your shareholders who are concerned that, yes, this may seem like something drastic right now, but do you want to see these falls in profit? Do you want to see them be permanent? And those are things that you're preventing by being proactive.
The concern I have is that the FDA has done nothing in 40 years, and you could argue that it's done nothing on this in 40 years because there's insufficient evidence that would support doing something. So how do we go to our shareholders and say that the FDA is at some point going to take action on this, when indeed it could be another 40 years before they do, if ever?
Yeah.
Well, the great thing about this is that even 30 years ago, we were not scientifically where we are now. And most of the stories involving, the studies involving triclosan effects in higher vertebrates have been in the last year or so. So the fact that the FDA was supposed to publish their results this past spring, but has been pushed back 1 year, that seems entirely reasonable given the fact that they've just been presented with new evidence. So we hope that they will come to a decision soon.
Yeah. As well, I don't think there's a potential for no risk of harm, or that the FDA will come back and say that nothing is wrong, because every other developed country in the world has already started restricting triclosan, so they must be seeing something, and that something scientifically must be found by the FDA as well.
Any more questions?
One more question. So suppose we did this, suppose we simply stopped using triclosan, phased it out, and started using one of the other additives. We didn't tell anybody, we kept it secret, we just did it. Still Colgate Total out there, nobody reads the package and ingredients, that sort of thing. And we simply do it that way in the hopes of having the least possible impact on market share. Would that be an ethical thing to do, or do we need to be public in terms of this decision?
I think that if that was the choice that your company ended up making, we would obviously prefer that you offer more disclosure to your customers. The main thing to take away from this would be that, with the example of Zicam, if customers come to you with these complaints and they match up with what these studies are showing, you cannot push those away. You need to take responsibility for damages you might have caused. And at that point, we would 100% recommend full disclosure.
Yeah, I don't think we're suggesting that you have commercials saying that triclosan was dangerous and now stannous fluoride is better, but you definitely should dedicate a section on your website to saying, why are we now using stannous fluoride? These are very real questions, and it's good to say that there's no definitive proven harm to humans, but there is that risk, and this is why you've taken the step. And it's also good to know that triclosan is not only used in your product, it's used in other things such as soap. So this is not the only way they're being exposed to it, but I think letting your customers know about this chemical that you think is harmful would be beneficial to them in more than one way.
More questions?
That's great.
Thank you very, very much. Now, what we're going to do next is have the judges leave the role.
Chief Compliance Officer at Cedars-Sinai Health System in Los Angeles. So, and actually a former faculty member at Loyola Marymount University. So that's my background. So my feedback to you is, actually the one thing I just wanted to share with you is that in your presentation, when you began talking about the bad publicity of triclosan, and needing to address the fact that there's bad publicity around it that perhaps the company's not looking at. You sort of diverted from the main argument regarding the harm that the product constitutes, potential harm. And it seemed to me that that's the strongest argument to make, that there is now a cumulative evidence that the risk level has reached the threshold that actually would be appropriate to take, and not sort of raising that public relations issue sort of, I think, diverted attention away from the main argument. So I wouldn't fuss too much about what's on the website, and there's a lot of bad publicity out there on Google and that sort of thing. So we're downplaying it.
So Steve Mullen, I work for Ethics Point. I'm a director of strategy, so I help to build software and tools to help compliance get better measurement of what's going on. I thought you guys did a great job. It's obviously a really complex problem. You know, I was worried about maybe asking too difficult a question, you know, because it's a very interesting situation that
Yeah.
this is an ethical decision, but from a business standpoint, you know, recalling the product is probably $1 billion, or at least hundreds of $1 million decisions. So I think there's a huge gap there around what would it take for a company of this size to do that. And I think a lot of the information you provided was really good. That some of the things that I thought would have been helpful in the financial section is maybe talking about the growth of like green toothpaste. You know, I know there's like Tom's and Sensodyne, all these like alternative brands that are out there. Because, you know, saying that we're the giant in the marketplace and the way we become a giant is by doing things in a certain way. Well, what about all these other brands that are taking away our market share over time? You know, maybe also about are the competitors or any of the competitors using triclosan? Because it seemed like you said we're the only ones doing it.
Yeah.
You are.
So I just began to think about, well, if we're the only ones doing it, did that give us a competitive advantage and that's why we've grown? Or is it more just because of our brand? And where is the risk of losing business? So you have the brand of doing the right thing, you have the test results and the information about the studies, and then you also have the world is changing. I imagine Colgate has a big corporate social responsibility program talking about being a green company and being environmentally friendly. So I think tying that all together with companies that are having success in the market would be a really good piece to add. But
Yeah.
I think you did a great job.
I had a couple of thoughts. To build off of David's, I really liked that you hit the reputation, but I'd like you to consider about, to his point, which I agree with, it needs to be at the subsidiary point. The reputation is I think something important. Can you quantify it all? Just mentioning it, because I think your point was there's so much bad publicity out there that all companies deal with on a daily basis that it's companies can't just, everyone's gonna get bad publicity,
Yeah.
whether it's founded or not founded. So when you mention it, just having, it creates a visual certainly to show us what you have, but if there's a statistic or something that gets to the financial impact,
Yeah.
I think that would strengthen it. The other thing that I thought of is that you don't tell us much about Colgate's sustainability program. And I think if you could link your arguments back to what they say they're already doing, I don't know whether they have information that says they want 0 footprint by 2020, or there may be something tangibly out there that you could use to bolster your argument. If by chance they should say that they want 0 footprint by X date, you could simply say, this is an example of how you could be driving that further and it fits your goals. If they don't say anything about any of that, then you might want to give some thought to what it is they do say about their sustainability track record and their
Yeah.
information.
I bet they do say something about some goal. They're pretty good about that.
So that would make it a more powerful, fact-based
Okay.
thing about the sustainability. And I agree with Steve's point that the rise of the green products is a good thing for you to know about, because if we'd thought of that, we would have asked you that question.
Okay.
And I think it's a logical question for a board for senior management to ask.
Okay.
Any other feedback?
Yeah, so it's a kind of a dicey proposition bringing up the possibility the FDA is lax, especially to a sort of corporate management group. I mean, because that argument cuts all sorts of ways. I mean, so I think you sort of handled it okay, but you really want to stress that the company needs to be driven by its own values.
Okay.
In this type of situation, and in some instances, that might require not waiting for government to take action, but the company guided by its own values taking action. I think that that's gonna resonate more with a management group than saying, look, you know, the FDA is ignoring stuff, you folks shouldn't ignore
Yeah.
stuff, you know, so again, that can raise all kinds of emotional responses in
Yeah,
terms of.
that's fair.
So focus on the core values of the organization. So as far as, when we talk about presentation, as far as presentation is concerned, referring to notes, you know, I would recommend, you know, trying to come up with just an outline of points that you use on one or two pieces of paper as opposed to,
Yeah.
you know, having notes on many slides, many pieces of paper where there's a slide on each piece of paper, because you just have too much paper to shuffle through. So if you just had a simple outline where with perhaps single words you want to remember, that you could glance down and easily catch that particular point in the presentation, remind yourself what you want to say next, it probably would go a lot smoother. Most presentations like this, consultants would never use any paper at all. I mean, they would be able to work off of the slides as much as, you know, as anything. So, but you want to minimize that and not find yourself shuffling through your paper like that. So.
And I think in terms of content and, you know, presentation, you could see it, when you guys were answering questions, you're much more comfortable, you clearly know the topic, you've been probably living and breathing this for months and months, and, you know, sometimes just getting rid of the paper is a little bit of a step, and then you're like, okay, I know most 90% of it already anyway, but
Yeah.
it's interesting, because you see the level of, I'm just more relaxed when I'm answering the question than.
Yeah.
I thought you both showed a great deal of poise. I thought you both had presence. I loved that you were neutral. There was nothing about you that was suggesting a tone that would set a management committee on edge because
Yeah.
it was we, they.
Mhm.
So you knew how to Present yourself in a business-like way that was more detached and neutral, which I think is effective. I think that you might get helped more by really being in the role of consultants, in the sense that you really have a command of this information, and that should give you more confidence to realize that you own it. You've created this scenario, you own it. So knowing that, it makes it easier, and I think the paper suggestions were excellent, because that's a crutch that when you own it, you need less. And the only tiny thing is, you handed us a document, but on the
Yeah.
bottom it says, find the Crest market share,
Oh, yeah.
and it's
sorry.
not there.
Yeah, no, that was just
Right.
a mental note,
But
the graph didn't come
what a
up.
business, in a business situation,
Never hand it to them.
somebody might ask you that, and if by some chance you hadn't had a chance to find that,
Yeah,
then you suddenly are less. So for the next round or whatever, you might wanna just cross that out.
yeah. No, it was just because the graph didn't come up, so I didn't want.
Yeah,
No,
we
no.
had thought our PowerPoint had been checked, and we flipped through it, and it shows up on the slide, but not apparently when you put it on the screen.
All right, well then it's a non-point. Anything else that you would like to share or say?
No, you did a great job, so congratulations.
You really did do a great job. What I'd like to invite you to leave, so that we can fill